tweets from Matt Baker of the Tampa Bay Times, who's been a part of our show many times. Florida State AD Michael Alford having an interesting talk to the Board of Trustees. Says the Noles contribute roughly 15% of ACC media rights value, but get 7% from the distributions. And on top of that, he also said this today in a Matt Baker tweet. At the end of the day, if something's not done, we cannot be $30 million behind every year compared to those, basically his peers, those who's they're recruiting against and trying to beat head up when it comes to college athletics, football, men's basketball especially. So we discussed this at length, and it's kind of like just wait a day. Earlier today, Ion. Later in the day, maybe not. Today, Florida State kind of, hey, we're not really thrilled right now in so many ways, paraphrasing. How do we get out of this? What should we do? How can the ACC help us? How can we find the hell with that? How can we help ourselves?
Well, and you know, so unequal revenue sharing has already been brought up at the ACC meetings. The question is, okay, that's clearly not going to get, if you're, their media deal's like 22 to 25 million a year, you know, off the top, and then you've got the other things that come in like college football playoff and NCAA tournament that put them in the 30s. So if you're $30 million behind, but all the rest of the teams are only getting $30 million a year, you're essentially asking the equivalent of one full team, which it wouldn't be that. It would be spread among the other ones. But if you want to get to $30 million more dollars, then you've got to ask every team to contribute that. And it's not just going to be to you, right? It's also going to be to Clemson and North Carolina. So it's not going to be all $30 million. What makes you happy? Is it 20? Is it 15? Because it can't be 30. Or is 30 the number you want to get? And if 30 million behind is the gap you want to close, then there's only one answer to that question, which is leave. And
yeah, because they're not making enough. They're not making enough in the ACC to be able to scratch that itch for Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, let's say Virginia, and anyone else have much left over.
Well, and look, so if you say you have the other 12 teams in the league, well, 12 teams, the other 10 teams in the league, and take the 4 big ones out that are going to get more of this. So you'd have the other 10 teams in the league give $50 million to those 4. Well, that's still only $12 million more dollars a year, which is not even halfway to the $30 million. So when you go, I mean, I'm just kind of loosely going off of this here of, you know, what their numbers are all year. And then can those other schools, do they want to afford that? It's just... It's a lot to think about, and the fact that he came ready to that Board of Trustees meeting when they said how much would it cost to get out, $120 million, legal says that, and then he's already been ready for that question, means that they've thought about it. So, I mean, it's strange.
Well, I had a chance earlier because Matt couldn't join us live, and because of what Chris Vanini just asked us to do to put him at just after 4, I had a chance to visit with Matt and kind of go over the quotes and what he paraphrased with the AD at Florida State. Well, first of all, when I saw those quotes, I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. Is that a little bit too much, or is that maybe the start, the simmering of what could be coming with the ACC?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I certainly, as I was listening at the car dealer getting a new headlight on my wife's Accord, my ears perked up as soon as Michael Alford kind of started talking about this stuff. Like, Florida State's I would say they've been in front of things for a while on this general movement. And at the last meeting, they talked about how FSU, where some of its revenues from boosters and tickets and that sort of thing, where they stack up against teams from the SEC and Big Ten, and they think they stack up very favorably. So they've been doing things behind the scenes and in some cases publicly to kind of promote themselves and make it clear how strong their brand is. What happened today, though, was on a whole different level where, Michael Alford, the AD, is saying something has to change for us to be competitive nationally. And, then when a trustee just asked straight up, what would it cost us to leave the ACC? My mouth kind of hits the floor. It's not a shock that those conversations are happening. It's not a shock that Florida State would have looked at the grant of rights to see what's in it, how they could get out. That's just due diligence. That's just being a good administrator. It's just smart. But when it kind of comes to the forefront like this, when it becomes public, when it's being talked about in a public Board of Trustees meeting, that kind of a whole different level here.
Is this the possibility that Florida State is Texas and Clemson becomes OU and they start to find ways? I know about, like you said, the buyout and all that, but could this also be, Matt, a part of that same question? Could this also be where they want to force the hand of the ACC on revenue distribution and revenue sharing?
Yes, definitely the last part. That's, to me, how I read this. And Michael Alford more or less said that. Like, by his metrics, and I don't think they're crazy or anything like that, Florida State provides 15% of the value, the brand value for the ACC with its TV rights agreement, and they get 7% of the revenue because it's split relatively evenly. Does that make sense? That's kind of their argument, is something needs to change regarding that, but there also has to be a hammer, right? If this doesn't happen, there has to be an or else. And the idea, do I think they'll leave? I don't think anytime soon, just because I think the grant of rights is probably so strong in terms, the money, the figure that they threw out was $120 million buyout. Plus, in theory, they would have to give up all the home or the TV revenue from their home games through 2036. Maybe that they can get out of that. Maybe not. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't seen the contract. I don't know if anybody knows for sure. But I do think today was kind of putting it out there that this is getting real. And do I think it's going to change tomorrow? No. But it's starting to think that this is not the healthiest thing going on.
Do you think that because it's Florida State, and we know, as you mentioned, they're one of the ones who've created most of the revenue, do you feel like it would be something that you might hear from Clemson or North Carolina or someone else maybe in the next few days?
I don't know about next few days, because it's not like this was a press conference that they called out. This is a board of trustees meeting, right, where 90% of it is unbelievably boring and uneventful. AD talked about other stuff too, like the facilities upgrades to softball and baseball and that sort of thing. This, to me, is just this was a regularly scheduled thing where he needs to update the powers that be about what's going on, and took this as an opportunity to kind of make a statement and make it publicly. I do think Clemson and Miami and probably North Carolina, maybe Virginia, some of those probably are sharing a lot of these frustrations because they're big brands that, shoot, if you put Georgia Tech on the open market with its TV, footprint and academics and everything, they'd be attractive. You look at North Carolina, Clemson, Miami, they'd be attractive to other places, and they're stuck in a league with a lot of guys that don't pull their weight, quite frankly, where they don't necessarily have an exit strategy. So I do think these conversations are happening internally at other places, and they certainly should. But is it going to become public? I don't know.
That's Matt Baker, the Tampa Bay Times. Appreciate Matt's time. He was not able to join us live, which